Welcome, everybody, to another fumbling episode of the Two Half Squads, the Bumbling Fumbling podcast dedicated 100% to the greatest game in the world.
Advanced Squad Leader.
That's right. And I'm Jeff. And
I'm Dave.
And we have a very special guest, Steve Pleva, is with us.
Is it Pleva or Pleva?
Pleva, shorty.
Pleva.
Yep. And this show is dedicated 100% to one of the greatest players in the world.
That's right. Steve, your reputation precedes you, and we are very happy to have you.
It is an honor
on our show. Sorry, it's taken us 16 years.
Yeah, I grew up not too far from where you guys record, but I haven't been back that much lately. So I was hoping at some point to maybe do one live, but that just never materialized. And then, COVID just.
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
Maryville, Indiana.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah, fairly close. And where do you live now?
I'm in Connecticut.
Okay.
About an hour from New York City.
Okay. All right. Well, glad you could join us, even with the huge time change of an hour. But it's great to see you. Great to have you on.
Yes, quite the honor.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, we usually kind of roll with your background, gaming background. It should probably be similar to most of us, but I don't know. What got you started and interested in gaming and wargaming?
Somehow, I think my older brother, got a copy of Panzerblitz from somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was in the military. He was a CO of an engineer battalion back when I was young. So I think it was actually one of my dad's officers gave us a copy of Panzerblitz. So my brother and I played some Panzerblitz, and that's how that was the slippery slope that got it all started. And I was more of an SPI guy than I was strategy and tactics than I was Avalon Hill, although it did have some Avalon Hill titles. But I've been playing some wargaming ever since I think I was about 10 or 12 when we started. But
when was the last time you think you played Panzerblitz?
Oh, I haven't gone back to it. Maybe no, college.
Yeah. Do you still have a copy?
I don't think so. No, I did it. I used to collect and not get rid of any. And so a little while back, I did a pretty big purge, although after the big purge, I'm down to about 70 titles. But so, I had a sickness like most of us do. But,
yeah.
But even if you don't ever play a game, I always took some joy in looking at the components. I'm a total map guy. Mm-hmm. I've been a map guy, forever. So just pulling out the maps and looking at them, and then whenever I get a chance to go to a battlefield, I was like, I think about the map and versus the real terrain. A great example is Gettysburg. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Gettysburg, but
oh yes, Mike Rizzi does very good tours. Yeah,
and you thinking of Cemetery Hill or Cemetery Ridge. It's not that high in reality, and then so it's never the actual map never quite maps the vision in your mind. So that's why I was love to go see it. And Devil's Den, of course, and Little Round Top is pretty dramatic as well. So anyway, so I've always enjoyed even the ones I collected and never played. I always enjoyed pouring over the components and see how a designer treats stuff. So I've been, wargaming, and then in '87 I started ASL, and I was pretty exclusive ASL there for, I don't know, 10 years maybe, plus or minus. I mean, a few other titles, but when I started, I dove in hard, and which is what I tell people: if you're going to bother, you kind of have to go that route. I mean, you're gonna.
Yeah.
And lucky, because in '87 we didn't have all the modules, right?
Right.
So a good friend of mine, he's even older, and he picked up ASL kind of late. He always bought the bits, but he never got into it. So trying to imagine getting into the entire system now, we were kind of spoon-fed one module at a time, which was a lot easier,
Yes.
And you had, probably the better part of a year to, get through your 10 or 12 scenarios or whatever you ended up playing from the module. So, and now it's, learn a basic system, and then you're going to jump into the Japanese, it's.
Yeah, it probably made it more likely that you'd try different new things because you had such a long time before any other new things. So it's like,
Oh yeah, and you play almost everything, you know, in the module, right? Now you can't thousands and thousands and thousands of scenarios. You play a fraction now.
I suffer from this overwhelm. I get very easily overwhelmed. And whenever I start looking at a new hobby or interest, I see the culture that's built behind it for 20 years or whatever it is, whether it's any kind of gaming, even video gaming. And I just get overwhelmed and I go back and play the old standards that because it's just too much. It's too much. So I don't know how people get into it, though. You have managed to get some people. I remember a few years ago, you did some concentrated effort to get new people into the starter kits. Didn't you run some like starter kit introductory courses or something at one of the tournaments?
No,
Something
for
like that?
Albany, the only thing at
Yeah.
Albany, we experimented with a couple of years of doing starter kit, and
That's what I was thinking about. Yeah.
it we'd won a kind of healthy year, and then we had one that wasn't a little under attended, so we've kind of backed off on that. I mean, if some starter kit guys wanted to show up, especially if they were starter kit that thinks they might want to play, even though, so I've been the tournament director for the Albany, the New York State Championship tournament. I think for 11 of our years. Now I'm going to be mentoring someone else for this year, so I'm kind of got a little bit burned out because I play test all the scenarios, and it kind of gets it got to be a little bit too much like work.
Yeah.
So so I still play test a few when they want an opinion on a scenario. So I'm still putting my opinion in, helping out, and then I'll do the PBS, the Pleva bidding system, which we use at Albany for bidding for sides. That's another whole topic we can get into at some point, because I was never happy with the balance provisions, and the ABS was the Australian balancing system, or bidding system actually, which is good, but it's a little hard to administer. So it took me 2-3 tries before I got happy with a new bidding system that I think is really good, and the players like it. So it's stood the test of time for a while now.
Well, we should just jump right on into that.
Yeah.
So
Tell us about
how is
that.
it different than
Oh.
the Australian? I remember when the Australian was a new concept.
Okay, so you bid a number of points to play one side or the other. So and there'll be 5 items that'll each have a point value to it. So maybe the first one will be 1 point, and it should bump your SAN up by 1. The 1 point, maybe get another light machine gun. 2 points, a half squad. 3 points, you get a T-34. I mean, so there's 5 of these items that are different points. What you do is you say, I'm going to bid 4 points. I want to play the Germans. So the Russian they get to pick which items they want from the list. So you kind of have a little menu item, and they vary in the number of points. So you're trying to figure out which side is more advantaged or not, and by how much. And so you bid it. Now, what made it work, because in one of the first iterations was that the guy who bid got to pick which items. The fact that the other guy gets to pick the items makes it more interesting, because not everybody picks the same, so they don't always pick the same items. So which kind of adds a little fun to it. And also you can get cross bids. You bid G2, I bid Russian 1, and both sides get to pick from the list. So what I like better about this system than the ABS had 3 levels. Level 1, and then typically level 2 was level 1 plus another item. Level 3 was items 1 and 2. it was really hard to get nice, smooth gradations. So, especially on a scenario that was imbalanced, at some point you had to have a big jump in there. So there was no fine tuning. So mine, typically a one bid doesn't mean much, right? You know, for the most part. So maybe you're not bidding so much on balance. You're just, you know, I just played defense 3 times in a row. I'm gonna bid the attacker. I don't care if they're what the balance is, but you know, so you might bid based on attacker, defender, or nationality. You know, I love playing the Americans. You know, they got all cool, fun toys. So I'm going to bid for that. So sometimes I'll do that, or sometimes you know you're playing a slow player and you don't want to be a defender against a slow player. So you know you bid for the attacking side. So like I said, generally speaking, the even though they might be a little reluctant at first, they're a little uncertain about the bidding. Once people start bidding, they get comfortable with it, and they most of the players really embrace the system. So I think it's worked out pretty well. And even one year, I picked a bunch of scenarios that were imbalanced. I knew they were imbalanced, and they were older scenarios. So Roar showed you they were pretty imbalanced. So we had some fun 5-6 point bids. Usually the bids go up to about 9, which is kind of the max. So, but the scenario list is published in advance, so people can look at it and you know they have time to they should have time to prepare and come up with a bid. So, we had fun with that one year by purposely picking unbalanced scenarios and letting the balance system balance them up.
Yeah. So
And the other thing that's kind of some people who don't understand it very well, they think it's going to be a big advantage for the more experienced player. So, but that's only if people are irrational. So let's say you have two players. Let's say player A is experienced, player B is inexperienced. And let's say a particular scenario should be a G2 bid is like the right bid. Although there's no such thing as a right bid, but let's pretend that G2 makes it balanced, or the consensus is G2 makes it balanced. Now, player A knows he's playing an inexperienced player. He could try to game the system and say, you know what? I think I can win at G1. I'm gonna try to sneak an extra point, you know, not give up an extra points worth of stuff. Well, what if player B talks to his friend who's a good player and says, no, you got to pitch G2. Well, then the guy who tried to cheat gets at G1, he's going to lose the bid. So the rational player A should just bid G2, you know, plus or minus whatever preference you might have for one side or the other, or again, attack or defend, or you know, some other consideration, or so. So even if the player B doesn't know, you know, maybe they didn't talk to their friend who knows the scenario, and they could put in a no bid. So the expert player says G2, the other guy says nothing. So he'll get the G2, but the other guy he'll get a couple points to play the other side. So, but if you did it the regular way, the expert player would say German, the other guy would say doesn't know, or maybe you might pick Russian because it doesn't know, and then you wouldn't get anything. So in this particular example, at least the inexperienced player is going to get something, whereas they probably wouldn't have gotten anything, or they may not have gotten anything if there hadn't been a bidding. So that's for the most part, I think it's worked out pretty well, and there's it's starting to catch a little bit of traction with some other people, but.
So is that an optional system that's available at the
Well,
tournaments, or?
Well, the hard part is so when we have our 30 odd scenarios for Albany, I got to go through and come up with
Oh yeah.
up to 10 items for 30 scenarios. So 300 items I have to come up with. Now, I've done it for 10 years or something. So I'm pretty good, pretty efficient at it. I have certain rules around it that I try to follow. One, I never try to change an SSR. That's the heart of the scenario, the chrome. Something special that makes that scenario really special.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to
I'm not
pick
going
out
to say,
an item. Yeah,
right, like, end of their strength, where you got the 10-2 leader that he's near collapsing, and you got to roll at the beginning of the scenario and see if he, or I'm sorry, at the beginning of the turn, see whether he collapses that turn or whatever, and he's TI. You take that out, you've changed the flavor of
yeah.
part of what was going on there. So, um, and it turns out the bigger scenarios are much easier to do than the smaller ones. There's just not as much. And if you add a squad to a small scenario, especially on the defender side,
Right.
it can be too much. So sometimes that gets a little bit tricky. I'm trying to come up with the right level. And it also depends on how balanced the scenario is. If the scenario is relatively small, say a company on company, all infantry, and it's a pretty tight scenario, then the things I add to it are pretty small.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a big scenario, and I think there's might need some help, then I can add some bigger items, adding a T-34, or uh a 548 squad, and things, you can be a little more heavy-handed with it, and you'll still be okay. But maybe what we can do is maybe I'll send you an example of what it looks like, and we can edit that in later.
Yeah, I can
that'd be
overlay graphics on the YouTube, and then we'll post the copies on the website. I don't know if many people go there anymore, but most people just download on their player, go for a walk, hit play, and listen. But
Yeah.
a couple fascinating thing that you said was that you would go for the attacker when you're playing a slow player. I don't think I have ever in my life heard anyone with the concept of bidding just because another guy is slow.
Oh,
Never would have thought of that. I guess I don't do enough tournaments, and at home we don't worry about, the balance as much. When we're playing, Dave and I are pushing through new scenarios. Usually if Jeff and I play, we push more toward new stuff we haven't done. We do check roar. But so yeah, so that's a great concept. Like, this guy is so slow, I'm not gonna sit here while he thinks about moving 20 squads, right?
most of the guys are pretty good, but there's a few players who are
Yeah.
a bit on the slow side. So I'm like, I'll give up a little balance just to usually, try to force the pace a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Makes sense.
Sometimes when I'm playing anyone who gets a little slower, like I'll just say Dave, because I've been playing him a lot lately, and I'll kind of go at some point if he gets a little brain freeze, I'll be like, well, you're gonna have to do this and that, and then to make sure this, right? And he's like, yeah, I know, I should just I'm like, well, okay, go ahead, because you only got 2 turns left. You're gonna have to, do it now or whatever. But yeah, and then Dave, the guy I've been playing all the we're into the Budapest ones right now. Well, at the end of the games, he loves looking at the balances, and we find that maybe some of them are not even helpful. Are we looking at that wrong, do you think? Or maybe if it's a larger scenario and you get to add a leader, well, they can rally a lot of people, but adding a light machine gun, we're kind of like,
some of them aren't. You only have one thing to work with on the normal balance card. So sometimes they're light. There's a few scenarios you could argue they don't even help the side they're supposed to help.
oh, really?
There's a couple of those out there. There aren't many, but I'm drawing a blank as to example, but some of them, are either too light or
maybe you gain more
or
points.
too heavy.
The other guy could get more points because they give you an extra squad, and he's trying to get CVP or something like that, maybe.
Right. You got a little company on company. Oh, the balance, you get a 150 millimeter OBA module, it's all woods. It's like, what? I mean, I haven't seen that, but I'm saying that the sometimes getting it right is hard. And that's what the bidding system I have is. I usually got enough fine gradations in the bidding so that it's so it shouldn't be heavy-handed. Now every now and then a scenario that's a little over, and it might be a couple of one-pointers which are light, maybe a squad, and maybe a tank. And then some people look at it and say, oh, I can't give up the tank at 3 points or 4 points. So they'll bid one under that, and that's their bid because they're that kind of that's part of the calculus that'll sometimes happen on bidding. They're like, I don't want to upgrade the guy's 9-1 to a 10-2.
Yeah.
So that's fairly common to upgrade a leader, or in battle hardened squads, or get past squads, or upgrade a medium to a heavy. Things like that are pretty common. But again, I'll give you an example. We can throw a sample or two up on the screen.
Right. Yeah.
I think you'll see it.
Yeah. Perfect. And so then you're out in the East Coast with the guys there, right? And who do you regularly game with, or who got you into the game also? Things like that.
Well, back in '87, I started playing. My first scenario was against Mark Porterfield, and he let me be the Americans in the original The Mad Minute.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you guys know that the original scenario is way pro-German. So.
I think they rebalanced it, right? When they reused it.
Quite a bit.
I remember playing that.
And it's funny, in the game system, all the way back to '87, I can still remember I was firing the 57 anti-tank gun at his half track. Hit, dud. Hit, dud. Mouth. So I can still remember that sequence from, umpteen years ago. I got slaughtered, but I got hooked. And so I played mostly with Mark and Ray Tapio of Critical Hit.
Yes.
Oh,
Ray.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So and they were a great pair of players. Mark was pretty tenacious defender. That's what he was best at. Ray was he was bold, and so he would take chances. So it was a nice mix of the two worlds, which in reality, that's what ASL is about. It's about risk management. And if you're super conservative, generally that's not going to work. If you're crazy risky, that's not going to work. You have to find that balance. And every move you make, the risk of the move should be less than the reward you can get from the move. So if you're running, 3 squads and a leader to get 1 extra hex in the open, where the guy can hit you with a 4-down-2, I mean, you're asking for it, because chances are that 1 hex doesn't mean much, but getting your 3 squads and your best leader all shot up is going to cost you a lot more than that. So I mean, that's what the whole game is about, is the risk and reward. And I remember playing one scenario playing Abandoned Ship against Mike McGrath. And I was the attacker, the Germans. And I ran my 9-1 leader through. I had to suffer like 2-down-1, 4-down-1 shot, but it forced the surrender of a couple guys of his. And I remember Mike was a little. I thought it was I thought it was a good risk, given I had a 9 morale guy, and the shots weren't. I wasn't giving up these killer shots, and it was a good payoff. So, but he was a little surprised I was taking that chance with my ranking leader, which, I mean, it could have ended badly, but I thought the risk was worth it. It was so that's kind of what you're always thinking about when you're playing, where
Is that the secret to your success? People are going to think, let's see, they're interviewing Steve Pleva. What is the secret to his success? It's got to be.
I've thought about this for a while, and I've and I try to, you know, what is it? Because it's not an IQ test, because I played plenty of guys who are smarter than I am. So it helps to a degree. I used to work with a guy. One of the things he always said was IQ up to about 120 will handle just about everything you can do in this world, other than like brain surgery and rocket science. Everything past that is kind of window dressing and may even be counterproductive. I don't know. I'm not making that claim, but that's why I think like great managers or of companies, they're smart guys. They're not always the super
Yeah.
brainy guys. Although I do know a couple guys who could run a company and are really super smart. So I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I mean, obviously, you know, so I think there's a certain calmness, uh, kind of a warrior mentality, I think, to be good at gaming, which when I was younger, I was a bit more tenacious than I am now. Now I'm pretty chill. Compared to back in the day. We used to play kind of cutthroat ASL way back in the day. Nobody called out each other's snipers. You know, you forget a rule, too bad. You know, that kind of, you know, now, you know, we remind each other of rules and snipers, and you know, it's all pretty good. I haven't witnessed an intentional ugly act in quite some time. Even though, you know, let's say I play about 3 events a year, 3 or 4 events a year. So so I think there's some of that. So again, I think there's a certain will component that I'd have a hard time quantifying. I think language skills, which is not, I'm a spatial relations guy. I'm not super strong in language. I think be able to read the rules and understand them and assimilate them. There's a little bit of that as well. That helps. But there are some rules experts that aren't particularly strong players. And there are some guys who aren't particularly well at the rules, but they're kind of their instincts are pretty good, and kind of their instincts about how combat should work, you know, and the game work are pretty solid. So it's knowing the rules helps. I think so. I think to be a top level player, I think you got to be strong at at both components. So if you're missing one or the other, and I've known guys in both that categories who, and that probably keeps them from achieving the top level, you know, or higher level of play. So, and
Do you find
so a friend of
yourself,
mine, oh, go ahead.
you find yourself going back to the rule book when you're playing? You still have to refer to it?
Sometime, well, yeah, everybody has to go to it for certain things, and
Yeah.
I try to do it because, well, I was a tournament director. So when you're a tournament director, a lot of people come to you for rules questions and clarifications. So I got good at knowing where the stuff was in the rules and finding it. So I have to admit, it's a lot easier on the electronic one than it is
Yeah.
on
Yes.
the physical one. And I have pseudo photographic memory in that I used to always remember where on the page everything was in the old rule book.
Yeah, and then they changed it.
They redid it, and it's a reformatted, and it's like, I know it used to be on the right hand page on the right
Yeah, it used to
bottom.
be.
I'm like,
It used to be under this picture over here or something.
yeah. So I mean, you know, some of those visual clues are like, well, wait a minute. This is, you know, this is somebody rearranged the furniture in this room here.
I totally agreed with.
So so I'm pretty good at the rules, and you know, for a simple scenario, you know, like I have the IFT memorized, I have most of the kills memorized, and you know, most of that stuff. But there's almost always some check of something. But you know, so just
Our friend Rich Spilkey has spent hours and hours and hundreds of hours creating various tables and charts for different situations. there's probably about 30 of them. He's spent, I mean, thousands of hours on this, and he'll take them to a tournament, and he'll be, he'll refer to his chart, and he'll say to somebody, well, yeah, you can't do that. Well, how do you know that? Well, it's here on this chart. And the guy will say, well, who made the chart? Rich will say, well, I made the chart. And the guy's like, yeah, that doesn't count.
But his charts are totally footnoted.
Yeah, they're totally footnoted.
Totally. It's got
yeah,
26.
Oh, well, the footnote, you should be able to find what you need to.
Yeah, but it's still
Um,
funny. It's still funny how people are.
Yeah, he's analytical. I know Rich.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in a while, but he did an analysis on OBA
Right.
in one of the journals, and that's another. Well, there's another rabbit hole we can go down. I've done a heretical rule set for ASLOC that they run every year at ASLOC. So it's a single. So the heretical mini that they run at ASLOC, that Brett runs at ASLOC, has a page of SSRs that change the game a little bit. So there's 13 of them. And again, I'll give you that file, and you can post that. But one of them is a change to the draw pile. So because the rules is written, you draw 2 red cards, the OBA goes away.
Right.
That's bad enough. Here's the problem. The opponent knows it's gone away. Now they can change how they attack. So my system, what it does is when you pull a red, you put it back with another one, with another red. So, but it always sticks around. Yeah. I mean, unless if the observer gets shot out of the window of the steeple, well, that's a different problem. But
radio falls out on the street, and then everyone knows.
Yeah, but I even have it though. A radio, it'll repair in a 1 or 2, and you don't 6 it out. So even if you break it, which is bad, it's a hassle, but at least you have a chance of keeping it around. And the main point of my rule is to keep the uncertainty in the game.
Yeah.
It ruins the scenario when the other guy, when he had to have a spread out attack, now he knows, oh, I can punch up now. There's no more OBA.
Yeah.
So magically he knows in that church steeple half a mile away,
right,
that OBA is not working. So to me, it can ruin a scenario, and it doesn't make the game as much fun.
Yeah.
So, and there's 2 others that are kind of in that similar vein, in that when you have a malfunction main armament. So one of my rules is you can try to repair at any point during the turn. So let's say I got a Panther with a malfunction main armament. Well, I don't try to repair it in the rally phase. I can do it later. And you got a Sherman. Now, in the regular rules, I try to repair it and I get a 2 through a 5 or a 6. And it's perfectly safe to go run across that field, run right by my Panther, which in real life, no rational tanker would just drive by the Panther. Right. So
it hasn't shot in a while, so maybe it's safe.
Well, it could be. Well, that's like well,
that's not good risk management.
when you're reading real accounts of battles, it's like sometimes they would pump rounds into a vehicle that's already been destroyed because it wasn't smoking or anything, and they're like, I think live or dead, But so if you're now under my rule now, if you're gonna run across that open ground, well, if I repair it, I throw that 1, I'm gonna hole your Sherman, and so you can't make the move. It's not a riskless move like we have now. So again, it's just the idea is to clean up a few, because I think there's a few rules in ASL that could have been better, that I think take away from the game. So that's what my 1 pager is. And I didn't want to have too many, because if you give guys too many, then you can't remember them all and stuff.
Yeah.
And some of them are. One is it's called Insta Berserk. When you go berserk, you go right then. There's no waiting till the movement phase. The only time you don't is if it's in the rally phase. If it's in the rally phase, you complete the rally phase, then you're off. So yeah. So if you do it any other time, and I got a rule for how you handle who can shoot at it and stuff.
Yeah, that's my next one.
it's the idea is that you get much more of a spontaneous activity out of it rather than, I don't know if you guys ever had this. You see the guy, he in your prep fire, you make a guy go berserk across the street, and then you have your whole turn to plan where he's going to go, and you even throw that half squad out in the street for him to charge, and you got all these -2 shots. You're going to just light them up. But I mean, to me, that's not in the spirit of what a berserker would be. A berserker is guys go nuts and they charge. Not we see them, all foaming up in the building for 2 minutes before they come boiling out, and when we're totally ready for it. So anyway, that's there some things like that.
So go ahead. I think we'd love to go ahead and do this interview in 2 shows. So we can keep going if you got time.
I get as much time as we want.
How then would that work with the berserker? So he can't move in the prep fire phase. Wait, okay, I get shot at in the prep fire phase. I'm even having trouble.
Go right away, and then so if it's the wrong guy moving, is the defender moving, then anybody who is moved or who is fired, who's prep fired, they're considered to have been marked with a first fire counter. So they'd always be able to do some type of subsequent file or final fire. So that's kind of, there's just a couple of, you'll see it's a short paragraph. It's not overly complex, but it's just meant to add a little more.
Yeah, so it just grants them
to the process.
Just grants them a subsequent shot in the prep. What you're saying?
Yeah. And it's and if you haven't fired, then you basically mark your guy with potentially in the first fire and a final fire, but at the end you're going to just have a prep fire when you're done. So you'll be considered to have fired.
Boy, it could be fun. That sounds like that could be fun.
So anyway, Wednesday at ASLOC every year they run a mini, and so it's been running for 10-12 years now, and I've tweaked the rules. I added one that I took away a few years ago, but I have something called, how we have a motion attempt.
Yes, right.
Yeah, I added a stop attempt in the same light, so you're not guaranteed the guy is going to be still in motion, because how sometimes the guy's moving. You run up to it with your tank, he's not going to be able to really do much, but if you can roll a stop, then he's going to get the first good shot. Come the next turn.
It takes off all those pluses you'd be saddled with when you're in motion then. Yeah. What else?
Well, and the other one is broken guys can FPF.
Oh, yeah, to defend themselves with.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry, they can have a
they can final protective fire.
Okay.
Broken guy. So it's at half firepower. Maybe even a +1, but all it does is takes out the certainty of rounding up broken guys.
Yeah.
You got a bunch of broken guys, you run your 2 half squads around either side of them, they're going to die. And you're running an open ground, and for certain that there's 0 that can happen.
Yeah.
Now there's a chance, you could the FPF, but and if a guy dies while FPFing, you could take him prisoner if you want. So you can't use it as a way to avoid being taken prisoner.
Oh, right.
So I've thought through that, because you could use it as a way to deny the other guy CVP in a CVP game. But
because if you fail the morale,
it's an FPF shot. So if you fail it, you're going to get cut in half, or if you're a half squad, you're going to die, which that could backfire on you as well if you're trying that out. So, and then the other big one is the SLE Freeze.
Oh yeah, I still have
so SLE Freeze, there's 2 changes. One, there's no +2 when you're CCVing a vehicle that's in bypass of your hex. So he doesn't get that +2 for being in motion. The rationale behind that is that you're so close, you're so vulnerable.
Right.
You can't really go that fast if you're basically hugging the building. The other thing, so that adds to the risk. Talk about the whole risk reward thing. So your risk is much higher because you can't just stay in motion. Well, you stay in motion, but it doesn't buy you anything from a CCV point of view. The other thing is, infantry can still shoot at an adjacent location. So they can defend themselves against. So if you go into bypass, and then what we do now is you go into bypass, the guy can't shoot out, you're running all your guys up.
Yeah.
And you know they're 100% safe. Well, you can defend the adjacent hexes. So there's no way to run up and then jump into close combat. They're totally risk-free.
Yeah, it just never made sense to me that the infantry would, even with the tank there, not use their small arms against the other infantry running right up to the windows and
Yeah.
doors. Just really
Yeah.
problems with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last one I'll cover is foxholes. Foxholes at death traps.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
What's with
So
that?
so my change is if you assault move out, you don't get fired on in the foxhole hex.
Good.
And so this does two things. One, it doesn't make them death traps, but it makes them different than every other terrain. So if you have a building, you can fly out the back door, right, and run away.
Yeah.
Foxholes aren't quite as good, so you can slink away, but you can't run out of them.
Right.
So it makes them their own terrain type, makes them interesting, but it makes them useful.
Yeah, because if you put a foxhole in the open ground, it's just they shoot at you as you're using that movement point, right? Going in or out or
yes.
with the net.
And,
so I'm like, well, you can't put them out there.
Well,
in the
and
woods maybe helps, but
right. But even if you're at the edge of the woods, you're still vulnerable because you got to get out of them. And it doesn't take as long to get out of a foxhole as it does to run across 40 meters of ground. I mean, it's just,
yeah,
it's not the right scale. So, and where I think that it's especially where this is useful is if you're at the edge of a hill, right?
Mhm.
You're up on level 2, so you could assault move out and you could melt away, but you can't go running out. You can't go running. And the same thing is for if you're in crest. If you're at crest, the same rule applies. So imagine you have a gully in one hex, and right next to it is open ground.
Mhm.
If you go from the gully to the open ground, it costs you 2. You can only be fired on in the open ground, right?
right.
Right, for the 2. But if you're in crest and you want to go on that same open ground hex, it costs 1 to get out of crest. And then the rules as we have now, you can be shot there. And then you go to the open ground for, it's still the same 2 movement factors, but you got to think it's easier to get there if you're from crest than you would be if you were down in the gully.
Yes.
So me, it's a very simple rule that fixes both of those situations with one little paragraph. So I think it makes the gameplay a little bit better. So anyway, it's
Yeah,
just,
makes sense. What does Perry say about all this?
oh, I don't think Perry's a big fan, but that's
So we won't see this in edition 3 of the rule book.
Unlikely. All right. Well, it was great, guys. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Well, thanks
Yeah, it was great
for
meeting
coming
you.
on.
And I'm sure in 5 minutes I'm gonna think of all the things I wanted to say that I forgot to say. But
Well, this show will be in 2 parts, and then that'll be our 3rd part. Yeah, maybe a couple months.
Yeah.
Have you back on for sure.
Yeah, that'd be
all
great.
right,
Yeah,
all right, sounds good. And I will I'll send you those files so you guys can look at
That'd
it.
that'd be
great.
wonderful.
With the video.
Yep. And then I don't know if you know our sign off, but we always end the show by saying
Roll low,
and rally well, but not when you're playing us. So goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thanks again, Steve. Have a good night.
All right, thank you. Good night.